important discussion. So a general intro to the organizers. We have Lily McMullen. Lily is a sophomore, double majoring in computer science and natural resources. I'm a senior in information science with an emphasis in data science. And we have Mike McKisson, who is an associate professor of practice and director of undergraduate studies at the School of Information. And a huge thank you to Mike and the School of Information for supporting and facilitating this important event. So general format, we're going to have an hour of questions and a Q&A followed by a networking event where we'll have a small dinner for you all. And so kind of a background to where the inspiration for this event came from. So we all acknowledge that the tech industry still has strides to make in terms of inclusivity, which has likely impacted many of you in your careers, whether that's in the classroom or your personal life, it's likely impacted you. And so our goal of this event is to foster confidence and inspiration and facilitate the discussion of how to evolve the tech sector to be more inclusive for all. So today we're focusing on enhancing tech spaces, both in academic and professional environments. Rather than dwelling on the current state of the industry, we aim to explore its potential for growth and improvement. So joining us today, we have Adriana Picoral, Diana Charbonneau, and Stephanie Murphy. Dr. Picoral is an assistant professor of practice in the Department of Computer Science at the University of Arizona. She is also a co-director for the Data Science Ambassadors Program and a co-organizer for the local Women in Data Science, the founder and organizer of the Tucson chapter of Our Ladies, and a mentor for the Women in Science and Engineering program on campus. And then we have Diana Charbonneau. Diana is a local community builder with a passion for reinvesting in our community. She is the corporate learning facilitator at Tucson Electric Power and the 2023 GTL Community Impact Awardee for Alumni Excellence. She is a mom to an adventurous 4-year-old and a native Tucsonian who received her BA in sociology from George Washington University, Washington, D.C. Diana sits on the board of directors for the American Association of Women Tucson as past president, as well as 100+ Women Who Care Tucson. And then we have Dr. Stephanie Murphy. Dr. Murphy is the director of the Women in Science and Engineering program and associate research professor within University of Arizona's Southwest Institute for Research on Women. Dr. Murphy conducts applied research, program evaluation, teaching, and training in areas of gender equity and education and employment, with special attention to STEM fields. She also has experience developing, implementing, and evaluating culturally informed community-based programs and institutional interventions. As an immigrant and first in her family to attend college, Dr. Murphy is deeply interested in making STEM education more accessible to underserved communities here in Southern Arizona. So yeah, now we're gonna get started with our panel questions.
Yeah, thank you so much for that introduction, Bailey. We're gonna go ahead and get started with the discussion panel portion. And first, we're gonna talk a little bit about the current state of diversity and inclusion in the industry. So our first question is, how are your industries currently addressing diversity and inclusion, and in what areas could they improve?
I guess I have the mic. I'll start. So I'll talk about computer science and data science. There is a lot of room for improvement. Around the country, we're around 20% women in computer science, a little higher for data science. Data science is newer. And more, I guess, interdisciplinary as well. The highest we had for women representation in computer science was back in the 1980s at 37%. So we're doing worse. So there's a lot of room for improvement and areas that we could improve. So we don't have as many representation for professors, for instructors. So we lack mentors. I lacked mentors, a mentor when I was an undergraduate in computer science. And also, you mentioned diversity and inclusion. And in general, right now I teach CS1, which is like, I have around 400, 500 students. Half of them are not computer scientist majors. So there is a lot of potential for including more women and honestly minorities in general, because computer science is male and white. Then the problem with talking only about inclusion is not talking about equity, right? It's like, it doesn't matter if we include women and other minorities if we don't make the environment. If you have to struggle all the time, right? And you have to prove we belong there. So we also need to make sure that we're creating environments where women are included, but they're also welcome, right? And other minorities as well.
Oh, that's hard to follow. So I work at TEP, but I'm gonna talk about this as utility industries in general. That's electric, gas, our infrastructure, if you would. And I have to say that we really do have a big push and forefront of DEI that is really starting to be built into the structure of our companies. For example, we as an electric company are part of EEI, which is the Edison Electric Institute. And actually, as an industry-wide DEI initiative, they launched for anybody who was a member in 2020, which really integrates workforce development and DEI priorities in one strategic place. So that's a lot of words. That means we're trying to ensure that DEI has a place in hiring, making sure that DEI is being really driven from the top. You know, we can talk about DEI all we want, but unless leadership is on board and they are really making and advocating for it, not much is gonna happen. And so I will say I am very thankful to work at a company like TEP because we have a lot of DEI initiatives that are wrapped around our hiring process. I'll talk a little bit about that later. And then not just the hiring process, but once you're inside the company, seeing that representation, having opportunities, and knowing that your voice is heard. That's one of the biggest things, is just making sure that it's a safe space and letting people know when you're coming in that there is a place for you, that your voice will be heard. And that safe space is hard to find. I think one of the questions is, what areas could we improve? So utilities is a 125-year-old industry. You know, there's some biases. We have some long-standing people who are going to retire out of the industry. We're one of the few companies left with a pension. So what that means is when you retire, you'll actually get money in perpetuity as an annuity, an annual sum that you get paid. So just shout and plan financially early. That's something that I am really big on. But we're really trying to make sure that we have a diverse pipeline of talent and letting you know that there are jobs out there and that we want you. We want you to come and diversify our workplaces, because until we do have that and the representation is there, we can talk about it all you want. But unless you see somebody who looks like you working there, you don't believe that you could be there. And I'll admit, like, this is a dream job I never knew I wanted. I'm very happy to be there, but we definitely have our work cut out for us in ways that we can improve in the future.
Hi, everyone. Okay, so I just want to say thank you for the invite. I'm gonna just pivot on this question and talk a little bit about what the WISE program does here on campus. I know it's not an industry unto itself, but it'll just give a sense of how we think about diversity and inclusion. So WISE is the Women in Science and Engineering program, and as you might imagine, we are our sort of mission is really to increase and improve gender equity in STEM fields. So that's across STEM fields. So we work in different areas, but you know, for this panel, we'll focus in on the tech stuff. So really, WISE has three main streams of activity. We think a lot about the STEM pipeline. So it's often unlikely that a student who hasn't had prior exposure is going to find themselves in a college like CS1, unless they've been introduced to those concepts or ideas or that field prior to college, right? You're not going to get to college and think, oh, I'm going to change my major from English to computer science, having had no prior experience. So one thing that we're really focused on is the K-12 pipeline into college. And so as you might imagine, we run a number of programs that are really focused on creating greater access for youth, primarily girls. So one of the kind of highlights there is we run the university's Girls Who Code Club, which some people in this room are already familiar with or already participating in. That club meets actually here in this room on Saturdays to provide free coding lessons in Python to kids like age 5th grade up through high school. And the way that we run that program is we have a crew of college student facilitators who are coming from different sort of tech computing fields across the university. So electrical engineering, information science, computer science, and they are delivering the curriculum, working with the kids one-on-one. So in that sense, we're twofold kind of goals here to sort of teach kids sort of fundamental concepts, but also to build relationships and do some intergenerational mentoring. So that's like an example of some of the work that we do with youth. And the reason why we do that work is because we want to see those kids in to continue along that path, right? For the ones who are curious and interested to do that. Or for the ones who don't want to necessarily continue on that path, so that they can make an informed decision, right? So that they can have the sort of information to make a decision about what they want for their future sort of college trajectory. The other thing that we do here on campus is primarily focused on supporting college students, so undergrad and grad students. So I would say in three main ways. We run a mentorship program, which pairs folks like yourselves with college students to work together over the course of an academic year, meeting once a month and working on whatever they decide their goals are. So we really try to provide a structure for people to meet, form connections, develop relationships that then will later become beneficial to them. And then the other thing we do is we run a 2-day symposium here on campus. It's all oriented around career development, sort of opportunities, resources, workshops, things like that. So again, some people in this room have participated in those things, so you'll be familiar with it. But really, that's just like a short-term kind of flash professional development support. So things like the Smart Start, Start Smart. I was flipping in my head. Salary negotiation workshop. Okay, so that's not technical sort of computational concepts like stuff, but it's really like, how do you negotiate an offer, right? Because what we know is whatever your starting offer is, that will sort of dictate your earning potential throughout the rest of your career, right? So things like that are super important to college students. So trying to provide that supplemental sort of workforce development stuff to college students, that's something we do. And then another sort of smaller piece to all of this, which I think is no less important, is the provision of a few scholarships. So sometimes with DEI issues, we we try to come up with these sort of complicated solutions to these persistent problems, right? Sometimes the solution is giving full ride scholarships to students, right? To giving, like, it's really sometimes not, sometimes we make it more complicated than it sometimes needs to be. Obviously, other times it is more complicated. But those are sort of 3 examples of things that we're sort of actively working on. The other thing we do at WISE is we help different units on campus and also in the community sort of assess and evaluate what they're working on. So a lot of times, when you're doing the work of trying to diversify or create greater inclusion in your organizations, it's really hard to track that data. A lot of people in this room are working with data all the time. Evaluating programming is really important because sometimes, it's hard to see the effects, and if we're not measuring them, then we can't use that as evidence to make those similar arguments for the value of these programs going forward. To the point about sort of areas that we could improve, I think about this all day, every day. As the sort of leader of our organization, I really try to think about, okay, who are we serving? Who can we serve better? So an example of that is at WISE, we really take an intersectional approach to thinking about gender equity. I'm sure lots of folks in this room have probably heard that term intersectionality before. For us, that really means that when we're talking about gender, we're not only talking about women, but we're talking about gender as something that is inflected by racial identity and ethnicity, as well as sort of class status, I would say, are the primary ones. And then, of course, for us, we're really interested in supporting as well first generation students. So we really do try to take a kind of holistic understanding of gender as it's sort of embedded in these other social systems. However, right now, admittedly, a lot of our programming is focused around supporting folks who are self-identifying as women. I think if we had more resources, I would like to sort of expand some of that programming to tailor more to the needs and interests of other types of gender minorities in STEM. So, for example, trans men, other folks who are sometimes left out of the category of women, for example, like cis women versus trans women. So different types of women, different types of genders have different types of concerns, needs, priority issues, obviously, right? We can't always do everything that we want to do, right, with limited resources and capacity, but that's an important piece. So I just want to sort of slide in there. And then the other thing that I think would be, I'm talking a little bit too long here, but the other thing that I would really like in WISE for us to be able to do a little bit more of is to provide more up-to-date information and data around what the workforce looks like right now and what it is projected to look like in the future. So when the students are going through college and you're studying, you're working, you're thinking about your job in the future, I wish that we could provide more accessible resources around what the nature of the workforce is going to look like projected out, 5-10 years from now, because as everybody in the room probably already gets a feel for, things are changing and they're changing fast, and we want to be able to meet the needs of students who are graduating into, this economy. So I'll leave it there.
Thank you so much for sharing your insights. I particularly liked how you talked about the need for mentorship and encouragement and change from top leadership. I know for me, mentorship was a huge part of my confidence in switching to data science. So with the foundation of where our industry currently stands, what specific initiatives have you seen that effectively create more inclusive and supportive communities within your field?
It's funny because I was never in corporate before, and so there's a really big stigma around corporate. And one of the things is when you go into corporate, you're one little person in a really big lake of fish. We have about 1,400 employees here in Tucson alone. We have about 700 at HQ and 700 out of Irvington, not to mention our satellite offices throughout Arizona. One of the things that has been really effective and that I have personally been part of is our business resource groups. So depending on what company you go to, there might be the opportunity, and this is where I really tell you to date the company that you want to work for. It's not just about the job that you're going to fill, it's do you match their values? Do they have the work-life balance that you want? I call it the work-life balance beam. There is no such thing as work-life balance. But it's really about these key things, and that's one of the reasons that I did go to TEP. So our business resource groups, we have, I think, 5 of them. We have women in energy, and anyone can join, doesn't matter what you identify with. We have a veterans group, LGBTQ+, an ecos group for sustainability. We also have a professional development group where we have mentorship matches up. I cannot understate the value of mentorship. I would not be at my job making over 6 figures where I am if it had not been for the mentors who supported me along the way. And they mentioned I do salary negotiation workshops. I have taught salary negotiation workshops for 2 years, and I still would not have negotiated my salary to what they offered me. And I'm very thankful that it worked out that way. But it's something that we just struggle with, and even how much you're taught or you're given the support, sometimes you just have to go through it to build that confidence and just be there. So anyways, went off a little, but those business resource groups are really a place to find community within a larger corporate structure, because it's hard. You're on a team, you have a job, we keep the lights on. Let me tell you, I grew up here and I used to flip on my light switch. That's about the extent that I knew about energy. We have this net zero heroes program where we try to conserve energy through our highest use. When did you guys start this? This has been going on for decades. All right, I'm not gonna say that again, but this kind of gives you an idea. You can be part of something very important and people might not even understand what that looks like. So it's really great to have industry peers that you can rely on and talk to about those frustrations, especially some of you might know or might not know the TEP rates are always a really popular subject. But it is, when you're an employee somewhere that cares about you and invests in you, it's just a different experience. So we have our business resource groups. We also have an intern program where we really do try to integrate our community in with TEP, giving them a taste of it. Because once you start working at TEP, most people stay there forever. I'm not sure you. It's one of my moms retired from there, and it really is a place that you find community and camaraderie. But my job in particular, I'm our corporate learning facilitator. So whereas you might go to a small company, and this is what I love, even small companies do this, and those are the good ones. When you offer learning to your employees that's outside of just your knowledge base, like emotional intelligence, that's actually what I spent all day facilitating, so I'm a little tired. Unconscious bias, crucial conversations, things that really need to be talked about. When we talk about tech, there's a lot of tech things that we focus on. Unconscious bias isn't necessarily one of them, right? But how many unconscious biases and just biases in general do you experience in the tech field as a woman or whatever you identify as? And so that's where I think it's really important to look at some of those benefits and initiatives that might be offered. You know, like I am corporate L&D, I get paid to do that, they don't have to pay me. In fact, our DISC team assessments, if you've ever heard of DISC, kind of like a behavioral, you know, imagine your team is dysfunctional, you don't know why, they call me. And I come in and I teach them all what their behaviors are like and how to communicate with each other. And I think all of you have experienced that in the tech space, you know, communication isn't necessarily a strong point depending on where you are or what you're doing. So just putting it out there so you can look for these benefits when you're looking at some of the companies, or if you have the opportunity to go in and learn more about them, ask that. What do you offer me as an employee to invest in my future? Because it's not just about you as their employee, it's about investing in your future. You want to retire one day, yeah, hopefully. And we don't really think about that here in my experience. The sun is always shining. We run a slow marathon, and we don't get winter, we don't get breaks, and then we find ourselves at 65 going, holy crap, I'm retiring, and I thought I was never gonna make it here, and I never thought about it. So just something to put in your ear that hopefully will stick, because those are really some of the specific initiatives that are inclusive and supportive in a way that you might not think. And that's why I wanted to bring it up, because they I'm sure have some more technical.
To connect with something that Stephanie said, Diana said. So basically their research has shown that there are three aspects for women to feel like they belong, they fit into an environment, especially when it's male dominated. There is the identity. Do I see myself as part of the group? There is the goals and values. Can I achieve my goals, professional, personal, in this field? And then there is also the social, right? The part of communication. Do I belong in this community? And to tell you a little bit of a personal story, I started coding. I was introduced to coding in middle school, 3rd grade. I wouldn't know about it if I didn't have a woman teacher to teach coding to us. Then there was no doubt in my mind that I was going to go into computer science. I got into computer science. I didn't belong. Didn't matter if I had coding skills. I didn't play Quaker, whatever, the shooter game. I didn't dress right. I was not the right gender, right? So my presence there was questioned. So that's the importance of belonging. So the other thing is, it's not really about harassment also. It is harassment for sure. But it's just like not being included, you know, not being invited for that project and so on. But all of these things are not only from bottom up, but it's from top down. So it's nice that you have that role in your company, because it is about how the institution supports change. So specific initiatives. So just a sec, let me look at my notes. Okay, so that's why I love about events like this one, that is focused on women. Women's hackathon, it's not here, that is happening on April 6th and 7th. There is the Women in Data Science, I saw Christina there, that is happening next week, March 29th. And so the Women's Hackathon is April 6th and 7th, I don't know if I mentioned that. Because it is for women, right? It's including women. It's not excluding men, but it says like, oh, this is actually a chance to focus on women and make sure that we have that community. And I have to say, being part of the Women's Hackathon is a completely different experience than being part of any other hackathon. It's very supporting environment. Women are amazing. You know, we build each other up, and we create that community, and you get a chance to meet people that look like you, right? And have your goals and your values. So we do have amazing initiatives right here on campus as well. Oh, and women in science and engineering, which I'm a mentor for, is also a great program. And what? I was talking about that, I got, but, you know, we also just got a recently a grant. Center for Inclusive Computing. So we are, like Stephanie mentioned, we're collecting data and we are making an effort to not only include more women, but make sure that you feel like you're seen, you see yourself in others, you build community, and we have a chance to build your skills so that it matches your goals for the future.
And we do have a salary negotiation next Thursday online too.
Question 2, okay, specific initiatives. So one thing that this question made me think about was a lot of the research that we conduct at CIRO, the Southwest Institute for Research on Women, is really oriented around this type of research called community-based participatory action research or community-based action research. And those are just a bunch of words that kind of mean ask people what they need and work with them to deliver it. So I think that the strength of those types of efforts are community buy-in is sort of built into the process. And so when you, a lot of times when we're thinking about how do we make change, especially in the academic setting, sometimes we have a tendency to sort of come in and say, well, this is how we do it. But really, it does not matter what you think. It matters sort of what you think paired with what is feasible, possible, eligible within that community of people, whether that's students or for example, like school-age children, right? So I think that, you know, when initiatives have that sort of community input, not even just input, but like decision-making, right? Coming from the people who are most directly affected, I think that those projects oftentimes have a greater success. So I will say that. The other sort of thing that this question made me think about, and these folks have covered already so many great projects, I think. But one thing that this question made me think a lot about, especially with respect to like DEI work in the tech space, I'm like a big believer in like put your money where your mouth is. Like where the money goes, so too will the values go, right? So sometimes within DEI work there is like a tendency to sort of overemphasize change in representation. I think it's often really, really, really essential that changes in representation are also mirrored in changes in where the money is out. Sometimes that doesn't happen, but when it does, those are initiatives that I've seen that have a lot of teeth and traction and sustainability. So a lot of times what we see in our work at WISE and out in the community in Tucson, folks in this room may or may not know this term pilot project. The pilot project is basically like your first time trying something out. Sometimes you get funding to do a pilot project. It's a little harder to get funding to scale projects up. And what that means is too often we see pilot projects run for a year or two and then they go away. And so thinking about that long-term sustainability scaling piece is also super vital to creating these sort of more inclusive communities, right? That will last the sort of test of time. And then the last piece that this question made me think about a lot was, you know, we're here at the University of Arizona. We are a public institution, a land-grant institution. We, as a public institution, are here to serve the people of the state of Arizona, people of the city of Tucson, many of whom are native Spanish speakers. And from my perspective, when we're doing work out in the community, right, if I'm thinking about like the Girls Who Code work that we're doing, right now all of our programming is in English. And so there's already a set of kids and families who are sort of a little bit alienated from that sort of paradigm. And so that's, I bring that up just to say, like, it's really important to think about, like, where are you standing and who, you know, like, what are our values? It sort of gets back to your both of your points about lining up your values with the organization that you want to be affiliated with or you want to work for. I think it's really important that we always remember that we're a public school. We're here to serve the people that live in this state, and a lot of the people that live in this state are not, you know, being well served by, do not have enough access into computing fields as it stands today. So that's another piece, thinking about like, getting off campus and thinking about the larger community that we live in.
Do you have anything else to add?
No, I was.
Thank you. Oh, that was
I'm used to
great.
it.
Yeah. I think those examples, specifically building from the ground up, like with Girls Who Code or providing mentorship opportunities, really can make great positive change and pave the way for future leaders from minority communities and minoritized groups to step up. And the change that we want to see needs to follow great leadership. So on that note, our next question is about spotlighting those who have already led by example, making positive change. So what leader, company, or field is doing a good job in this space, and what lessons can we learn from them?
Well, we all know I'm a little bit biased, so, and I am not a paid TEP, spokesperson, so this is all my own opinions and not that of TEP, so. Disclaimer. I think one of the things that I really love about TEP, I'm gonna shift a little, I wanna talk about our hiring. Because it kind of goes down to the core of when you're bringing people in. You know, when you're looking at applications, it's really hard to diversify when you need to be equitable, and, you know, there was a study done by and I'm mixing this up because I did a keynote a couple weeks, so, I believe it was the University of Chicago. They sent out over 80,000 job applications to, over 1,000 Fortune 500 Fortune 500 companies. Half of them had traditionally white names, and half of them had distinctively Black names. And the Black applicants were called back less than 10% fewer across the board. And some of those companies, those Fortune 500 companies, discriminated at 96% or greater, just based off of the name on a resume. So this is one of the ways I think we can really increase and help in the space of DEI, because if we're not even getting them in the door, how do we make these changes happen? So I actually just had a friend of mine just go through the hiring process at TEP, and a good friend of mine is a recruiter. And one of the big things, we post our salaries and our pay ranges. Like, that's a big one. I don't know if you guys, any of you have been looking at jobs, but you'll see a lot of jobs posted now without even a pay range on there. And it's almost disrespectful because you go through that entire process and get to the end, you're like, you're paying me $30,000 than even what market research is for this position on the low end. So that's a really big one. We actually include DEI throughout the entire interview process. So all of our interview panels, anything that's happening, we make sure that we have representation in those rooms. We make sure that we are asking DEI related questions, very similar to what Stephanie, you know, it's about walking the walk, not just talking the talk. You know, we can say, yeah, we are working on our DEI initiative, but we really do take a front and center approach to that, and trying to make sure that that's coming through in our, not just our hiring, but in our representation. And also letting people know that when they come in, their thoughts will be valued, kind of what I was mentioning earlier. We're also really inclusive in our outreach. I was really glad to hear this. We reached out to the Society for Hispanic Professional Engineers. I don't know if you know, that's here at U of A and PCC. We share our job listings with diversified groups outside of the company, like the Women's Society. And it's really, for me, growing up here, so many people have worked at PEP and I just never understood. And it really does go into what you invest in your employees. And so that was just a little from the hiring perspective of it. I really do feel that we do a good job. Of course, we still have areas to improve. You mentioned change. Oh, let me tell you, change incorporated is fun. There's a lot of it and people do not take it well. In fact, that's a whole course that I teach, is leading through change and leading through change inclusively. And we actually have a whole course on sense of belonging, because that's a big piece. You know, when you have a team of 20 engineers, even here, you got a pretty diverse group of personalities in there, and not all of them jive well, you know, and so really trying to bring that all together and make a cohesive group that's there to be productive, but also, again, to invest in you and your futures. And you'll hear me say that a lot, because sometimes we just go to work, we show up every day, and we forget that life is a journey, you know? We are human beings, not human doers. So I know we're here talking about tech, but also do the things that make you happy. And I'm sure a lot of you probably do like to do tech things in your spare time, you know, just do what makes you happy and be passionate about it, and it always will take you in the right direction. I got really off topic there. Who wants to go next?
Guess the classic example is Harvey Mudd. So in 2005, they realized, like we all know, that they had a problem in computer science and gender representation. Took them 10 years, but they got over 50% representation for women. So they did 3 things. There's CS1, some of you took CS1 here in the Department of Computer Science. Instead of being like just coding, it's more like understanding of the entire computer science field. And I've heard from some of you how not knowing like your goals, right? Where am I going with this degree? What can I do? That is very important for women, more than men, I guess. So that makes a difference, actually introducing early on what you can do with a computer science degree. Second initiative was, I have to say Harvard Med is it's a liberal arts college. So, you know, when you said something about pilot programs that you run just for 2 years and then it's done, this is like you have to put the money where, you know, the intention, right? So the second thing was offer internships for women, research internships for women during the summer. Again, the idea of like paying women to do something and also get a perspective of what it means to research computer science. Then third was to take a lot of women, a lot of students to Grace Hopper Conference, which I highly recommend you look into. There are scholarships for that. But it goes back to the idea of belonging and finding other women and seeing yourself in others. Besides Harvard Mud, I think that all of those things, again, they're doable. It's possible to do it, but you do have to invest money in those initiatives.
Okay, so leaders in doing a good job. Okay, so there's a few programs on this campus that I think are like really good examples of folks that have been really thinking through the persistent issues that that keep coming up, thinking about creative solutions. And sort of one big thing I see is with tech stuff, there's sometimes, and this is more in popular culture, versus like here locally, there is this sort of persistent narrative that you have to be so intelligent to be good at computers, and if you're not a genius, then you know this is not for you. And I think that a lot of girls, receive that message. Also, they're receiving kind of messages that, well, you better not mess up, you better not make mistakes, or you're going to fail, and you're not going to be successful. I think that creates a sort of a difficult situation to try something that might be hard for you, right, off the jump. And so I think a few programs on campus, I think, do a great job of like working against some of that sort of master narrative. One that comes to mind is the ASIMS program. If folks are familiar with that program, a program on campus that's really geared around providing supplemental support for first generation and low income students across some fields, but obviously some in computing. The Engage program, which is at the College of Engineering, they do a really good job of providing all this supplemental pieces like in the summer before you start college, right, to get students like kind of feeling more confident about what they're capable of and things like that, so that when you get into the sort of into the studies, you have a little bit more resilience. I think all that stuff is kind of really, we can learn from those types of approaches that take less of so that are working to support individuals to develop resilience and confidence, motivation, that'll help them persist in their trajectory, but also that are working on like cultural aspects. So I think both you spoke about the sort of the culture sometimes. Even if you are a talented individual and you find yourself like your story, right? You're in the program and you're like, I'm not like other people here, and I don't fit this culture. I think a lot of times cultural interventions, environmental interventions, changing or asking leadership. So, for example, faculty, department heads, deans, things like that, to really invest in these types of programs is something to learn from. And I think leave it at that.
Just one more comment, sorry. So we mentioned, the events here on campus, there are, great initiatives. There is also the 3 C's, cultural competence in computing, going back to the cultural, aspect of this, because it is. So this is more for faculty and staff members. I was in the second cohort, there's other cohorts. It's a really good program, from Duke University. It's the whole year is about cultural competence. And it is about inclusion, but also make sure that you create equitable environments.
Okay, so now we're gonna do kind of a bit of a speed run with these last 2 questions. But now that we've talked about leadership in companies and larger scale initiatives that are going on, we're going to pivot towards smaller changes we can make as individuals. So what advice do you have for students and young professionals in male-dominated fields who aspire to make a positive impact in their careers while fostering a more inclusive work environment for all?
I do this a lot, so I'm gonna just wrap it all up for you on that. So my advice don't be discouraged. I know we hear a lot of stats out there. Yes, there's not that many women in certain fields. We are 20% in certain statistics, but we really are seeing a shift in that, especially when it comes to female leadership. If you have a female leader of your team, it might not matter if the majority are male, if you have that support. And it won't change until you get in there to make the change. So don't be discouraged, and also know your value. Don't ask for less. This is something that we go over in our salary negotiation. We do have one next Thursday. If you'd like, I'll send you the link if you want to send it out after. But this is something I say, keep a master resume, especially now we'll kind of group at the beginning. Start now, keep track of all your projects that you've worked on, things that you've been published in, your research that you've done, things that you were successful in. Those are going to be what you use to negotiate your salary in the future. Because when they ask you, well, what project have you done that you worked on that you exhibited and showed this that we should pay you more, you're gonna pull out your list and you're like, well, let me tell you the 50 that I worked on because you've been keeping track. We as women, for some reason, don't see those transferable skills as apparent as they are. I'm gonna make this really fast. I was accepted to GW for computer science actually. And I went up there and all I saw were white guys in suits. I'm not even joking, I can still remember, in suits. What really makes me sad is I changed my major to poli-sci before I even got there, and they get to hack the mainframe of the defense department there. So they're just such great opportunities, and they need to see people like you in their classrooms. They need that representation. And I took a huge career, like I traveled the country, I did promotional product trade shows, I worked on a #1 TV show, I had all these awesome experiences, but I wanted to be a hacker, and I still stand out as a great hacker. That was when hacker came out, I'm dating myself. But anyway, so just have confidence in yourself, especially as you grow, and when you're applying, reach out to that company, find out more, connect with the recruiter, connect with them on LinkedIn, find out if you can. Believe it or not, they're gonna be more helpful than you think. So I'll kind of try to wrap that up there.
Hackers is a great film. If you haven't seen it, you should check it out. Little data now, but it's a great film. Okay, advice for students and young folks getting into male-dominated fields. 2 big pieces of advice. Like the first is you gotta network. If I remember when I was in college, I did not want to network. That felt gross, dirty, like I was using people. That is not the case, right? You gotta find your crew. Network with your peers, but also network with people who are in the workforce, who are in leadership positions. And if you're interested in that and you don't want to do it alone, check out the WISE program and we'll help you find a mentor. You got to network because it's so true. Like it's so much often the case that it's really not what you know, it's who you know that will get you into a job, or will at least get you into an interview. Once you get the interview, there you go. That's your time to shine and show your knowledge. But getting in the door, networking is so vital. So that's the first piece. And start early, start now. And don't just think about networking in terms of like looking up, but also looking across. Because this is the entire sort of work of fraternities and sororities, right? It's to build social networks, right? It's like ready packaged. So to try to do that work in a non-institutionalized way, right, without that structure is a little bit harder, things like that, but it is really so valuable. And those fruits may not come to be, born until years later, but the relationships that you're making now are gonna serve you in your communities, right, when you're building that up later. So that's the first piece. The second piece, and this is gonna sound a little maybe crass, but you have to take power, right? You have to. It's hard to be assertive sometimes, especially if you're new in the field and you don't feel like you have full subject matter expertise and stuff like that. But no one is going to give you power. Like, you're going to build power with people that you're in community with, and that you have solidarity with, that you have intimacy with, right? You can build that power, but you have to. No one's going to like necessarily just like invite you to sit down at the table and give you decision making power, right? They might invite you to sit at the table and then you'll take a picture, but to be in a position of power, right? So often it's the case that you really have to sort of step forward. And that can be really hard as a young person, but that does not mean that you are aggressive. That does not mean that there's nothing negative about that, right? It is perceived in certain types of ways, right? And those are very gendered assumptions and stereotypes, which is why it's all the more important to have that network of people behind you who are supporting you, who you can lean on and stuff like that. And this is a little corny, but I do want to read one quote that I think about all the time from Toni Morrison, who said, "I tell my students, when you get these jobs that you have been so brilliantly training for, just remember that your real job is that if you are free, you need to free somebody else. If you have some power, then your job is to empower somebody else. This is not just a grab bag candy game." So really, I mean, what that is all about is like, if you get into a position of power and leadership, it is truly, it's important to look around and think about, okay, who else can I help out? And I think that's how you build power in a sort of macro scale. So those would be the two pieces of advice. Oh, I have one more, sorry. One last one, which is folks may know this concept of double consciousness, or this idea that if you are coming from a minoritized community or a minoritized sort of identity within a sort of a dominant, you're in a dominant space, there is there's a skill set that is developed, right? Wherein you know how to talk with your, in the language of the dominant space, but you also know how to speak in a non-dominant language, right? So having those two things, which is essentially what marginalized folks who are in these spaces sort of learn to develop, that is a superpower, right? It is a superpower to be able to read the room and to be able to make an informed decision about how you want to behave in the room, right? That doesn't mean that those are your values, but being able to read the room and move effectively and navigate those types of scenarios is a superpower. And that is definitely something that, for better or for worse, is something that marginalized students learn and can use to their benefit later.
And just really quick, her point about network, that's how I'm here, because I don't feel like I'm qualified compared to these amazing people up here, but people have seen me speak, and for all of you who are like, I used to shake like a baby lamb if I had to get up and speak in front of my classroom even, but it was something I saw somebody get up on stage, a friend and a mentor of mine, and she inspired a whole group of people. I want to do that. I started Toastmasters. I'm about 6 or 7 years into my paid speaking. I just had my first paid speaking gig, made $1,400 off of it. So just know, like, there are those other things, and the network and the people that you're around and grow with, like Lacey John. I've been part of 2 mentorship programs in town. There's Greater Tucson Leadership and Emerging Leaders. So those are also 2 other mentorship programs.
All of that, but also rest and find joy. It's exhausting being a woman in a male-dominated field. Someone asked me once why I care so much. It's like, because it's exhausting being a woman, immigrant woman, in a society where technology is made by white males. So you bring a lot of value, right? It's like, right now, a lot of people think the same way and don't see solutions that work for most people. So you have anger, but also it's exhausting. It's okay to be angry. I see your anger and it's valid. So find your people and find joy. You know, find the people who actually support you and rest. Rest is important. Yes.
Okay, we only have a couple minutes left, so the last question is pretty quick. Hopefully it'll leave us all on a positive, optimistic note. So in under a minute, what excites you the most about the next generation entering your field?
I see that. So, I'm trying to be positive. So, young men are not. They're basically as conservative as before other generations, but not women, right? We know better. So we have more information. So I'm really excited about their anger. Honestly, they see things, they understand things, and I say, yes, you're right. This is messed up. So that's what excites me about it. It's like we know better.
For the first time, we have 5 generations in the workforce. So think about it. You, your grandma, your great grandma, your great great grandma. We have 5 generations in the workforce. We have the opportunity to learn so much from each other, because this stat isn't true now, but it used to be 65% of the jobs that exist today did not exist 20 years ago. And that's the same for in 20 years from now. So you might be up to date in all of that, but like she said, enjoy life. Life is about being, and one day it'll all come together and you'll realize that if you did all of that, you really made it out good. You got to experience life, do what you're passionate about, and you got to experience life along the way. Travel the world, please. Don't just stay in Tucson. I know hopefully not all of you are from here, but just live your lives. You only get one chance. Not YOLO, because you really only die once, but don't get me started.
Well, who knows? Okay, so under a minute, what excites me? One thing I think I see in younger students today, and maybe you should correct me if I'm wrong too. But I think maybe a little bit less so than in years past, and for various reasons. I think, how do I put it? When you're a minoritized person in a field, right? Sometimes there's a lot of burden to be a sort of model minority. Make no mistakes, do everything right, never have anything bad happen, right? And never be vulnerable, never let people see your vulnerability, because you have to be tough, you gotta grind, you have to be better than, the best, all that stuff. And I think that a little bit what I see in this generation is a little bit more openness to vulnerability. And for me, that reads as like more humanity, like you're more whole people, you are a little bit, there's more allowance of being a whole complicated person. And I think, across the board, that's a good thing for both people in the generation above you and also for the generation behind you, which I think is called Gen Alpha. But I think that's a super inspiring and kind of like exciting thing that I have sort of seen in some students I work with. And I think the reason why that's so exciting is I think when you have that sort of parallels to this sort of capacity to kind of hover above yourself a little bit and see yourself as embedded in whatever kind of community that you're in, like the idea that you can think a little bit more outside of your own me experience. I think that lends itself to 2 really important things. One, interpersonally, it lends itself to greater empathy because you're able to understand someone else's experience a little bit more easily. And then 2, I think it lends itself to a sharper analysis of like power and stuff in systems, sort of that. So I think, like more openness to vulnerability is a good thing. And I think that's something I see in generation today. And that will definitely improve the tech landscape for sure.
Can I say one more thing?
I would advise. So the goal is to sit at the table. No, the goal is to just change the table completely. So that's
Yeah. Well, thank you all so much for the words of wisdom. That was amazing. Let's give our panelists a round. that was the end of our discussion. We'll open it up quickly for some audience Q&A, and then we'll head over and we have some food and snacks for you guys, and we'll do some networking. So does anyone have any questions to start off?
This is kind of random, but earlier you said that in the 80s there was the highest amount of women in tech, and I'm curious like why you think it was higher then and like why it declined.
It was not as prestigious, right? So that happens not only in computer science and tech, it happens all fields. The moment that the certain jobs in the field like start making more money, then it's more men do it. I mean, they're more hired, often hired. So that's why.
The other thing that I've heard with respect to this is also the explosion of video games. So more accessible video games for kids, a lot of times boys. Girls do play video games totally, but that is something that I've heard in terms of like some of the influencing factors.
Well, I'll take it from the other side. So 10% of Fortune 500 CEOs are women. I'll say it again, 10% of Fortune 500 CEOs are women. So that also, you need the representation to bring in more people. And there's a Dr. Mary Regan here out of the U of A, the Center for the Philosophy of Freedom is doing research on the competitiveness of women, because we've been told, you know, well, women take lower paying jobs, they go into male dominated fields, they don't ask for more money, yada, yada, yada. Well, it's not that we as women are competitive, we're just motivated by other things than just money. That's not. And so they're really trying to do some analysis along those lines and seeing what drives women to go into certain things like that. So look into the research. Claudia Golden, yeah, she does research on that. At the bottom, women and men make the same amount of money across everything right now. It's just that also women, you know, capitalism. They are more in charge of caring for children, caring for parents. So they need more flexible jobs most of the time. And then at the bottom, there is more equality than at the top, 10% sales. So are women. It's just that there is an expression greedy work. Your job requires you to work 24/7. And that's not good for no one, right? It's not, we shouldn't do that. Have to realize that the corporate America was created by white men who had wives, right? And that is, we need to change that. So women do have an interest in tech. We have the skills. We do care about money and video games. It's just that we have other responsibilities as well.
Does anyone else have any questions? Yeah.
I really appreciate the emphasis on networking and the importance of it. And I'm curious if you could provide a little bit more details. And Stephanie, your point too towards we rarely receive training in that. So how have the three of you specifically networked? Either approaches that you take, or maybe a specific example where you recognized an opportunity to network with someone important, and how did you do it?
I'll take this one first, just because I'm so.
Okay.
I'll take this one. I'm so bad at it. I don't want to do it. It makes me feel weird. Even to this day, it's something I struggle with for sure. And the ways that I've done it is when I've been forced at conferences or events where my mentor has brought me along, and sort of we worked the room together, things like that. So I've really almost kicking and screaming. I don't know. I mean, I could probably reflect on that a little bit more. But for me, admittedly not great at it. The successes I've had have really been the structure that sort of pushed me to do that, right? As a graduate student, for example, and then the other one is I teach this to the wise interns, the elevator pitch, right? Trying to just practice what your pitch is, who I am, what I do, what my values are, why I'm cool. So that when you do run into somebody, maybe it's unplanned, you have that in your pocket so you feel more comfortable and you don't have to think of it on the spot. And that can change based on who the audience is, but practice, and then telling your mentor that you're not good at it, and letting them give you the opportunity to try it out if you are like me and very sort of hesitant.
I networked heavily for about a decade, by force my work. I was in sales for the longest time, and I joined Tucson Young Professionals, actually, so I would really recommend if you are interested in finding like-minded people. One, you have to talk to people who are your peers or your age, so then you start to move up, and then they actually have networking with like CEO roundtables once a month, so they bring in a CEO and you can hear from them, and then you get to network with them. So just starting out slow, but that network that I built up for the decade is what pays off day in and day out. I have people coming, so we're part of something, I organize something called the Big Collab, where like, nobody knows about our women's organization, so we put on this big it's 20 women's nonprofits, and you just come and network. So just finding, I would say, find something you're passionate about, whether it's a professional organization, they have meet and greets, you can go and you can just talk with people. Start with 1 or 2 people. I always say, go in with a mission of, I wanna talk with 2 people for this reason, have something, and once you've accomplished that, you don't have to stay there and network for 3 hours, so many people just sit and talk, so know what you're trying to get out of it, is where I'm going with that, sorry. Don't just go to a room and just, oh, I'm gonna just wander around. You wanna have some purpose, whether it's to build a skill, to find a mentor, to find a peer. My mentors have been life-changing for me. Like I said, I would not be in my position right now. I never even would have looked at my job title. And that's another thing. In tech, job titles are really different. So I'm gonna try to wrap that up there. But networking can really pay off in so many ways. It's how I get all of my speaking stuff, and I don't try. So that's it makes sense.
You're good at it. So, yeah, go to places where you think that you're gonna find your people, like Grace Hopper, Miss Hackathon, like saying the same thing over and over again. Also, that saying, surround yourself with people who will talk well about you and defend you in a room you're not in. And be that person to other people as well. So it's a two-way street, right? It's exhausting.
One thing you would tell younger you, knowing what you know now.
I don't know. I don't think about it. I always say, I am the compilation of everything that happened to me. In fact, it's something I struggle with my 4-year-old. If you don't experience struggles and hardships, how do you become the person that comes out of the fire? How do you become the phoenix? So I'll tell you what I stole from somebody else. Ask for help. It's not that I didn't ask for help growing up. It's just when you're independent. I have a single mom. You do things on your own, and you forget you can ask for help. Ask your teachers for help. They will. Your professors want to see you succeed so much. I can't tell you. I'm so thankful for everybody who's just lifted me up. So just ask for help and be willing to take that help. That's.
What would we tell our younger self? I got really good grades in high school. I got really, really good grades in college, but I always did the thing that I was the very best at, which was reading, writing, critical stuff, analysis stuff. And right now I'm in the slow and ongoing process of learning Python myself. So what I would tell myself is just go, and I love it. It's so fun to code. It feels fun. It just hits that little part of my brain that likes things to be organized and stuff like that. And I would have told myself, just try. You don't have to do it. You don't have to do the things that you're the best at. You can do the things that you like and not be the best, and that's fine. You will get through. You don't need to get straight A's to be able to get a job later. That's what I would probably tell myself.
Like my mentor said, sometimes to go fast, you have to go slow, and that's hard for me.
I don't think I would tell myself anything. I think, I think that we all mistakes, like Stephanie said, right? We go through life. It's not, I got into college, I was 17. I knew I wanted to do computer science for sure. But it's like, life is long. You can change your mind about things. And you'll make mistakes, and that's fine.
Do you have tips for how to find female mentors? I have found that all of my mentors have been my bosses or advisors who have all been male. So maybe something about proactivity or something.
Get connected with women in science and engineering.
But yeah, so if you're looking to meet other women, why So our mentorship program is really focused on trying to pair mentees and mentors together based on two main things, right? The two main things are, what are you interested in? Like, what's your sort of expertise, what's your field, and then like, what's your identity? And so we do try to pair people who like match in both ways. Not all the time we can. Of course, there's plenty of allies who are acting as mentors in the program, so it's not just like all one way. But that is really what we're trying to do on campus, is connect women together and to work with anybody who thinks gender equity is a good thing, regardless of their identity. And so the WISE program, we do the mentorship program, has a ton of women professionals who are volunteering their time and come back year after year. And so that's just our little niche. And if you're looking to connect with people, we can help you with that.
Formally, there's 3 programs that I know of. One is Tucson Young Professionals, but there's also Emerging Leaders. You get matched up with a C-suite level mentor for the entire year, every year. So that was the kind of my next step. And there's also Greater Tucson Leadership. We have Startup Tucson has mentorship, but the informal way, which I tell people all the time. Last year, when I was trying to figure out what job I wanted to go into, I would just reach out to people on LinkedIn. I was like, I admire you. I would love to meet with you. And then one of them in particular, I was like, if I could be half what this woman is one day, I will be successful. And I said, you know, I admire you. Do you think you could make time to meet with me, either virtually or have a lunch once a quarter or once every other month? And most women will, especially if they have the time, and they'll tell you if they don't have the time. And if they don't, they'll usually say, but I know 3 other people. And that's how I had a few of my mentors actually. And mentorship is just a life-changing thing. So if you're looking to connect with us, let me know. I'll try to find you. But just something you're passionate, someone you look up to. LinkedIn searches are amazing. In fact, I think that's
We'll wrap it up there. Should we do another?
Yeah.
Applause? And yeah, feel free to go grab some snacks from the table back there and hang around and network. Thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate it.
Nice job, y'all.
Thank you.
well, let's give a shout out to these awesome women. It is not easy and we appreciate you.
Thank you so much.